Good morning, everybody. Again, welcome to this month's session of the Caveon webinar series. Today is an excellent session. We're calling it Unlocking the Mystery of the Validity Triangle. And these webinars are great. We get to engage with our clients and with different test industry leaders, and today is no exception. We're very pleased to be joined by Dr. Phil Dickinson. He's the head of NCLEX, Chief Officer of Exams for the National Council of State Boards of Nursing. And he is going to present his model, sort of a new paradigm for test score validity. Now, as we get started, a couple of things. The session is going to be recorded, and we will share that with all of the attendees. You'll get access to the actual recording and the actual slides. Everyone out there is muted. If you want to ask a question, we welcome that. Please use the dashboard in the GoToMeeting dashboard to do that. And so here's what we're going to cover today. Dennis Maines is going to talk about what he calls the Psychometrician's dilemma. He's going to share what he calls the cheater's philosophy, and then overview what statistics really can and cannot show. From there, we're going to turn things over to Phil, and he's going to talk about a new paradigm he calls the validity triangle. Then we'll have some conclusions and open things up for Q&A. Now, before we get started, really, what we're all about here today is, can statistics be used to address security concerns? And just to sort of frame the discussion, we want to conduct a poll. So let me launch this. And here we go. The question is, statistics without additional evidence can be used to initiate investigations. So give us your response. Looks like just a few people have voted so far. We'll leave this open for about 30 or 40 seconds. We welcome your reaction. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What are your thoughts? So I like to get about 3/4 or more. Yeah, we'll keep this open for just a little bit longer. We've got about 80% of you have voted. I'm going to close this, and then I'll share the results. I can't see these. Dennis, you can, can't you?
Yes, I can. It looks like about 53% agree, 17% strongly agree. No one has no opinion. 26% disagree, 4% strongly disagree. So there definitely is some dichotomy in the group, with most people saying you can.
All right, I'm going to hide this now, Dennis. Thank you. And turn things over to you.
Okay, so thank you all. It's good to chat with you today, share with you some things that we've thought of and that we've learned as we've talked to people in the industry. This first area is about the psychometrician's dilemma. And as I have read the literature and listened to different presentations, I've realized there's not just a single cohesive view on statistics and cheating and test security. You know, there are a lot of varying views. And just perhaps like we have varying views on the poll question. So I'm just going to share some of those views here with some of the people that have said things or written things in papers. Let's go forward. So the first paper is from 1977 by Frary, Tideman, Watts. They talked about a statistic called G2 that they used for detecting answer copying. And in the paper they said it would never be feasible to prove that cheating occurred based only on a statistic. And I think that's a fairly accurate statement. In fact, it's never feasible to prove many events based upon things that you have, where you have to draw an inference, not just statistics. And we'll go forward, though I won't want to expound on that too much. But they also then they gave another point of view here. They said, basically, that it's okay to invalidate a score and ask a person to take a retest. That's a fairly modest request. What they say, the modest, undeserved burden that would occasionally fall on entirely innocent persons is a small price to pay for the reduction in ill-gotten gains. So even though there would be some people falsely accused, perhaps, of cheating, they felt it would be okay to ask people to retest. Let's go forward. So here's another perspective from Van der Linden and Gian. This is from 2012. They were talking about using statistics for erasure analysis. They said their proposed analysis should never be used blindly or relied upon as the only evidence of cheating. Although it has the full rigor of statistical analysis, you know, in mathematics and everything that goes into that, it does make errors. You know, it does not find every possible instance of whatever they were detecting. That's a type 2 error. And it will flag individuals or groups or people when there was no problem. And that's a type 1 error. So that's probably really is the nub of the issue here. Is error associated with any kind of statistical inference? Let's move forward. You know, and they continued on, and they said this is direct quote, we've reformatted it, but a statistical test of cheating should, and then they listed a lot of things that it should have. It should be part of a larger suite of procedures. It should use independent sources of information, and then they gave some examples. In other words, in their view, a statistical test of cheating should never stand on its own. It needs to be buttressed up and supported with other information. Let's go forward. And this is a very interesting quote out of 2014, published in Test Fraud, edited by Kingston and Clark. And Wayner says, we're trying to estimate the probability of being a cheater. So that's kind of difficult, according to Dan Arley, and he's published a lot in this area, behavioral economics. According to him, we're all cheaters. So if that's the case, the probability of being a cheater is 1. But it kind of, I think, is a little bit out of step with where we think we really should be here. So let's go forward. So here's Greg Cizik, and we really like the way Greg Cizik has been talking about this issue in the past few years. 2013, at the National Conference of Student Assessment, he gave a rather detailed talk, and I've pulled out just a few relevant quotes. So first of all, he says, most conversations about cheating lack clarity. And I agree that most cheating lack clarity. There's not been some real specific things that are said, and that kind of lack of clarity introduces a lot of confusion. And then he says this, it just is not incumbent on people who are measurement professionals to prove cheating. Instead, the role is to be able to express concerns or cautions about score validity. So that reframes the whole debate. From an issue of cheating or an issue of behavior to an issue about the score and the validity of the scores and what's being measured. Let's go forward. And he also said these things. He admits that he has changed his opinion and perspective in this area. He used to say, no, you have to have more than one source of evidence, clearly in line with what Van der Linden and Gian said. He said, now I'll accept a single strong piece of evidence. I think it needs to be strong, as reasonable for pursuing further investigation. And sometimes a highly improbable finding simply demands further scrutiny. And when the data are so far out there and you have no reasonable explanation, I agree that you need to look at that. And you need to ask really serious questions about what that score means, and is it even valid? Let's go forward.
Dennis, before I move forward, I just want to point out that the notes from Dr. Cizik's presentation, he allowed us to publish those on the Caveon blog. And so here is the link to that. And I think that many of the folks out there would find a review of his presentation to be quite illuminating. So now I'll proceed. Thanks.
So just a summary on this area I call the psychometrician's dilemma. You can't prove cheating using statistics, and that's absolutely true. And statistical detections are not perfect. Some cheaters will go unpunished. Some innocents will be wrongly accused. And that's true. So the part of the dilemma is deciding exactly how to frame that decision. And there is a whole area of statistics called statistical decision theory that helps do that. And we're not going to go into that today. But, you know, at a certain point, for example, we know that our criminal justice system in the United States is not perfect. Some people that are innocent have gone to jail. And many people who are guilty have been allowed to go free. And so it's a question of, you know, the, let's say, egregiousness of the behavior and being able to make decisions about that. Or in the way we're framing the conversation today, just how much lack of confidence we might have in a test score. And this third point, statistical propositions, that's a big word. That's assumptions or the statements. They just have not been explicitly stated. And that has led to a problem. It leads us to talk around the issues but not address them because we don't have rigor, the rigor that a mathematician would desire. And so we have to be very careful the way we talk about these things and not just wave our hands but be precise in our language. Let's go forward.
Before we do, Dennis, I think Phil has a comment. Phil, are you?
Yes. Thanks, Steve. I wanted to say that if you look at what Cizik was saying in this summary, this is really not new to measurement or testing. It really is about a view. What Cizik is suggesting, and Dennis, you as well, is no different than the fundamental concept of differential item functioning. We use differential item functioning not to prove bias, but to flag items that need further investigation, and then we use other tools to investigate them. But we do know from a flagged diff item that, in fact, there is something not stable around the parameters of that item that suggests it's measuring something different than what we intended to measure. So it's really the same concept, but we need to apply it to security.
Phil, thank you. Dennis, any reaction, or shall we move forward?
No, let's move forward. I agree. That's my reaction. I agree. This next section of our presentation I call the cheater's philosophy. And hopefully, you know, hopefully we will understand a little bit here. Don't intend to talk lots about this, but hopefully gain some greater understanding. Let's move forward. So for me, we're going to do a poll first.
Yep. So I'm going to launch this and want to get your reactions, audience. The question is, how have you communicated test security concerns to candidates? can you please respond to one of these 5 options? I guess it's choose all that apply. Yes, sorry, choose all that apply. So we've got about a third of the group that's responded. That is quickly growing. We'll keep it open for another 10 or 15 seconds. We've got just under 3/4 of the group that has responded. I'm going to close this up, Dennis, and I'll share the results. Any reactions?
Well, by far the number way to communicate test security concerns with candidates is through the candidate agreement, and that's 71%. But definitely it appears that people not communicating test security concerns and candidate agreements, that's really important. That's your foundation step. And on your website, you should use as many tools as possible to communicate what you're doing with security. Definitely when you start talking about emails and validation notices, those are about 40% each. I think that we have to be really careful. So those are reactions, and there are 25% others. So obviously we could have improved our survey question here. We'd appreciate hearing back from you on those other ways that you communicate test security concerns to candidates.
But I'm going to hide the poll, and we'll keep marching forward.
So for me, I think I had an aha moment when I saw this segment on the Dr. Phil show in January 2011. It was titled Whatever It Takes. He was interviewing this lady, Jolie Fitch, who was the ringleader of the Steinmetz academic decathlon scandal. HBO did a movie about this particular scandal called Cheaters, and there was a lady chosen to represent Jolie Fitch, so she is figuratively the star of the movie forever as Cheaters. And Dr. Phil asked this lady, is there any question you cheated? She says, no. You knew you cheated? Oh, yes, we got the questions. They actually broke in to the place where the questions were, and they got them. So no apology, no shame, embarrassment here at all. Just kind of in your face. Let's go forward. Now, as this segment goes forward, he says, "Well, are you sorry about this?" And she says, "No, not really, other than getting caught." And then he begins to probe her and ask a lot of questions. And she begins to answer these. Well, I tell my kids life is a gray area. I would do it all over again. There's always someone around who can give you the answers. It wasn't unfair because others are doing it. And every time she comes out with one of these statements, Dr. Phil's mouth opens up another half inch. By the time he's done, his chin is almost dragging on the ground, and he has nothing to counter this lady's position because he's trying to address her position on moral grounds, and she rejects those completely. And for me, that was the aha moment. Let's move forward. So the cheater's philosophy: I don't accept your moral code, therefore whatever you have to tell me doesn't matter, has no merit. If you think I cheated, you better prove it. If you can't prove it, you can't call me a cheater. And we have learned it works to the advantage of the cheater when you use the label cheater, because then you have to come down to this kind of stuff. You have to show this person what was going on in their heart, whether they intend to commit fraud. You have to show that this person actually engaged in the conduct. You have to show this person. And then you have to show that, well, cheater, if you're going to label me as a cheater, that means it's forever. And if I can show you one time when I didn't cheat, you can't label me as a cheater. And so it becomes extreme, and they try to show that you are biased and prejudiced. So it works to their advantage. Let's go forward.
Well, I know that Phil had a comment here.
Oh.
Phil?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the important thing here is really the problem is that to label someone a cheater or to define cheating is a value judgment based on the particular culture you come into. And I think it's been our problem throughout a lot of testing is that we're chasing cheaters. And quite frankly, here's the problem. It's the wrong battlefield. If you can't definitively define it as a latent trait, it's tough to measure. But what are we? We're measurement professionals. We're not social scientists. As a general rule, we're measurement professionals. And what you've got here is every time you use the word cheater, it becomes an argument of morals. And to define morals in any single group that is universal becomes a very difficult thing. So I would agree. It is the last statement. It works to the advantage of the cheater is absolutely correct. And the reason that I would argue is it's the wrong battlefield. That's not where we should be. We should be talking about measurement issues because we will win there. We will not win in the social setting or judging morals. That is not where we should be at.
Phil, thank you very much. Hey, just got some feedback. Dennis, if you could speak a little bit more loudly, please, as we move forward.
Thank you. I just want to add to that. So after I saw this segment, I sat down and wrote an essay or a blog, taking the high ground against cheaters. It was definitely, I viewed it as a battlefield thing. And we have to take a strong, we have to recognize where we have our strengths and where we can take our position of strength. And it is not in the behavioral arena. Okay, let's move forward. So this last bit that I'm going to talk about, this last area, is what can statistics show? So we really have said you can't prove cheating, but what can we show? Let's go forward. So one thing you can show is when you look at data, you can show that the tests were not taken independently with really high confidence. You don't exactly maybe know how it happened or what caused the dependence between the two tests. You can show they weren't independent. You can show that questions were answered inhumanly fast, like someone reading and answering questions at a reading rate of 1,000 words per minute, or 1,500 words per minute, or 2,000 words per minute. And even at those rates, speed readers only have about 50% comprehension, and I submit at 50% comprehension, you cannot answer questions accurately. We can show that tests were completed using stolen answer keys. There are Trojan horse items, other kinds of things you can design into your test. You can actually show that this happened. And you can show that test performance was inconsistent with respect to scores, maybe prior scores, or even within a test, or with respect to the amount of time that people took to answer questions. You can show all of these things. All of these things give you some place from which to question the score and the validity of the score. Let's move forward. And here's some more. When it comes to erasures, you can show that wrong to right answer changes were just out of line. They're just inexplicable. As Greg Cizik said, they further demand an explanation. And you can show that observed patterns of test taking through time, from, maybe in years, last year, this year, or as people retest, that it's inconsistent with normal test taking. The thing I find interesting is when I look at data, and I see that someone has taken the test 10 times and still is not able to pass the test. That's just not normal. People should be studying and learning, and if they have anything at all in aptitude, they should pass the test, especially within 10 attempts. So you can show that. Let's move forward. So if you're going to make inferences about cheating, these are the things you're going to have to show. You're going to have to demonstrate means, motive, opportunity. This is all the criminal kind of state law here. We're talking about behavioral issues. You have to demonstrate intent. You have to demonstrate culpability or responsibility, or what they call it in the field, linkage. And you're going to have to look at all of your possible explanations and discard those, so you can rule out any other thing that except this thing that's left over. That's what you have to do in order to make an inference about cheating. Let's move forward. So I think I have one more slide here about proper inferences. So it's really important to list your propositions, the thing you're really trying to state, what you're trying to show, prove, disprove, demonstrate, show, or counter. You need to have relevant data and statistics for these propositions. So if you're going to make inferences about scores, then use statistics to give you information about scores. If you're going to make inferences about behavior, like cheating, then you need to use statistics that give you information about behavior. Most of our statistics don't really give you information about behavior. Some do, especially when you can establish patterns over time, but most do not. And it's always important whenever you're making your slides, stating your findings, that they're conditioned upon your propositions. That's what good science does. And that's what we need to do here, too. Let's move forward, please.
So we have our third poll, and I will launch this. The question, Dennis and Phil, is if you have a formal statistical analysis program in place or are planning one, what's been the biggest challenge faced in implementing it? Is it a political challenge, a legal challenge, operational, some combination? We've got just a few people that have responded so far. Keep it open a few more seconds. If you're out there, please just give us a reaction. We appreciate the insights. Keep it open a few more seconds. Got about 3/4 of the attendees have responded, so I'm going to close this, Dennis, and share the results. Any reactions?
Well, so 31% say operational challenges. Political, legal are not by themselves big selectors, but 58% said a combination of two or all three, which for me that's a really strong number. It indicates that there's some significant communication that has to happen within organizations to communicate to shareholders, stakeholders, the importance of doing this work and how it integrates, how it plays into the entire program and what the program is about, the integrity of the program. So that's my reaction on this slide.
Very
Bill,
good.
do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, I think that this is clearly the results do not surprise me, but it also suggests why we need to move from what I'm getting ready to talk about, a traditional view or paradigm of validity versus the what I call the new or the validity triangle. I think we need to look at these. There are three arguments here, and I would, although it's not clear here, my guess is the problem arises is we have to make three separate arguments. We have to make an operational argument, a legal argument, and a political argument, as opposed to a single argument here. and I will show you, or I think, how that plays out in the new paradigm. So, Steve, go ahead.
Very good. I'm going to hide this, Phil, and I'm glad that that poll question served as such a setup, sort of served you a softball for you to swing away at the fence with your sessions or sections. So I'm going to turn things over to Phil.
Well, first off, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. If you'll go to the next slide, I want to talk about this concept of how we currently, in my opinion, view the validity paradigm and security's role in that. If you think about everything that Dennis has said, he is talking about this sort of emergence, in my mind, from the traditional paradigm to the validity paradigm, and it seems that the movement is heading in that direction. But currently, if you look back at the original 1977 article, if you had to suggest how they viewed security and validity, I think it was under this paradigm, and I think the majority of us currently in our own shops operate under this particular paradigm, and that is that validity is described as a two-rail system. Validity, we look at content. We have great programs and processes for content just to ensure that we have face validity, that we have construct validity, that we're writing items appropriately, that they're being reviewed, and all of the things to ensure that the validity of the content remains. And then the emergence of a variety of psychometric principles over the year have just continued to strengthen. We always talk about reliability. We do diff analysis. We do item drifts, a variety of things just to ensure that we have validity. But the way that we viewed, or we currently view, security is really it's just an activity that holds the validity argument together, or a set of products. So if a new technology comes out, what do? We seek for a product to chase that technology. If we have a little problem with content, we search for a security product to sort of roll up the window so people can't steal it. And all of those are good, but it shortchanges security. It starts viewing security merely as an activity and not an integral part of the validity argument. And let me illustrate it this way. If you look at this sort of ladder or railroad track, here's sort of how we make our validity argument now. I could take out the three middle security activities, and my validity is still stable, maybe not as stable, but I'll make the argument that it is still stable. And so security sort of gets a short shrift here. Instead of saying I must have all five of these things to ensure validity, I really only need two to hold the rails together. And then if I want to make it more stable, I just add more product. I think that this is because we're chasing cheaters. And I'll even go back to something Dennis said in one of his slides, and that is that we can, and I've looked at these slides a lot before we got here, and I even missed this. It says that we can tell, we have statistical programs that can tell if an item was stolen, like a stolen item key. If you remember that phrase, here is the problem with that. We just changed the battlefield back to an intent. Stolen implies an intent. What we really can prove is that you had unfair access to, or previous access to, the answers. And if we use that argument, then we're no longer chasing intent. Remember, he says that's a behavior. Stealing is a behavior. That's not where we need to be. But this current paradigm allows us just to do that. Steve, next slide. What I suggest is that there actually is a better paradigm that we ought to be looking at, and I call it the validity triangle. It's the new validity paradigm that we're using at the council, and that is that instead of a rail system, why don't we look to engineering and find the strongest structure, geometric structure we can find, and that would be a triangle. And if you now look at this this, the middle of that triangle, is validity, and the legs are content, psychometrics, and security. Now, it may be a small change, but it allows us to make a cohesive argument like we do in psychometrics and content, that security is essential to validity, and that you cannot, much like the rail, take half of the leg away from security and then consider your validity argument to continue to be strong. It also allows us now to do exactly what Dennis was talking about, is change sort of the battlefield. We shouldn't be chasing technology per se, because quite frankly, we are never going to win the battle in technology when Google is out there making Google glasses. They're out there making new contacts that are Google Glass. The problem is that's not where we're experts. We're experts in validity. So this is where we need to end up in terms of viewing security as a process that is vital to validity, and stop chasing the terms cheater or stealer or any of those things, and go back to what we know best. If we look at this triangle, what it allows us to do is look at the final theta. What I mean by that is every student who takes a test gets a score, and it is that score in which individuals choose an amount of reliability in which they will make a decision, and we are experts on the amount of stability around that final score. And it's not just psychometrics or content. You can have the best psychometrics in the world, you can have great reliability, but if you have a proxy test taker, that psychometrics doesn't matter, nor does the content, because you're releasing a score, quite frankly, that is invalid for the decision that's going to be made. So the idea here in this paradigm is to bring everything back to a validity argument. Not did they intend to cheat, not did they intend to steal, not did they intend to do bad. In other words, to take down the Dr. Phil interview and not ask those questions, because the minute you ask those questions, you are now on a moral ground and you can't answer those. But what we can do is say to the users of our scores, whether or not that final score we believe is stable in measuring what it purports to measure. Security plays a major role in that. Slide. Now, I do realize that this is a new concept in some regards, and it does have its challenges. And I will tell you that the awareness of the security role in the validity argument is not something that is seen across the entire organization, which, quite frankly, is why I think the poll comes out like it does. Because if you center all of your security arguments under validity, then it's easier to make the political, legal, and operational arguments. Look, we spend a lot of money on psychometrics, and when I look at my budget, I go, well, what am I spending on security? And I can tell you that has changed over the last 4 years. We've made a concerted effort through the entire organization to say security is just as important, and if it is, then we need to provide the resources for security, and we made that on a validity argument. And I would argue, or I would encourage each of you to consider that same approach. At the council, we forbid the use of the word cheater. That is not what we are chasing. We are measurement experts, and so we've erased the word cheater from our lexicon, and what we talk about are valid results, and anything that causes the results to have instability, or we believe instability, then it is our responsibility to notify the end users of that particular instability. Not that candidate X cheated, but that candidate X results are questionable and should be investigated. I think one of the other big problems that we have right now is it is very difficult, even if you go to the APA guidelines, to find meaningful and visible standards for security as it relates to validity, meaning that it's interspersed, But you have a psychometric section, you have a content section. What I'm suggesting is that we need a security section in the guidelines that clearly define it as critical and what that means in terms of standards to validity. Once we have that, then we change the battleground for any challenge of our exam related to the stability of the final score back to a validity argument, and we can co-opt psychometrics and content into that legal battle, and I believe that we win the day. I think that there have to be better use of data forensics. I know there's some research going on into using big data analysis, neural networking, machine language. A variety of things are being looked at right now as ways to determine if the final theta, the final ability estimate, the final score is stable, measuring what it purports to measure. We need to spend resources as the security community, the psychometric community, the content need to combine their efforts and their resources in building the better use of these data forensics. And I would say that the last thing that is really a difficult thing, if you look at content, we have content experts who are trained. We have I/O specialists who are trained in construct measurement. There are classes, there are schools, there are degrees for that. If you look at psychometrics, there are clear programs that are designed to get PhDs just in psychometrics. So in other words, there's academic rigor and inquiry into these fields. What we lack in the security field, in my opinion, in order for this new paradigm to be successful, is a robust, specialized, professional, academic field of education related to test security. Not internet security, not financial security, but test security. If you go out on LinkedIn right now and you type in a test security specialist, you will get a lot of hits. And there will be a lot of titles like Vice President Test Security, Chief Test Security Director, a variety of titles. But if you go down and look through the academics of that, this is all on-the-job expertise. And I'm not discounting what they know. What I'm saying is that in order for our paradigm to grow stronger, all of us need to start pushing for sort of a very robust, focused, test security, academic, professional career path. Steve? Slide. And
sorry, I'm on mute. Sorry.
That's quite all right. So, you know, I think in conclusion, and before we get to questions, I echo these comments by Greg Cizik, and that is, as you just saw, I urge us to reframe our concerns. And I echo his comments in my validity argument that we aren't chasing cheaters anymore. We are measurement experts. We are the experts, and therefore this is a validity issue, and we should focus on the validity issue because then we can, in fact, use statistics to flag those final scores that require more intense investigation. And it is important to treat every case in the same way so that if you look at my validity triangle and you assume that security is a vital process, not a product, what you do is develop policies, procedures that are uniformly applied, whether it be political, legal, or operational. It does not matter. They're applied consistently throughout the situation in which you're investigating, whether that be an individual, a group, a population. If they're applied consistently, we have a stronger validity argument, and therefore I suggest to you we will win more of these arguments than we have in the past. So I thank you. You might tell that I have a passion about this. I do think it's something that has been left behind as we've moved forward in the other areas, and we need to move this along. Thanks, Steve.
Phil, thank you so much. And audience understand Phil's under the weather, so the fact that he was able to participate today, we're very grateful and clearly very impassioned. I was standing up sort of pumping my fist, yes, Phil, yes. We've got some questions out there, and so Phil, one of the things that was raised, you mentioned some of the challenges with the new paradigm, the validity triangle, but those are sort of general or even industry challenges we must contend with. What are some of the things you face within your organization in morphing and evolving to this new paradigm?
I think part of it is, it goes back again to behavioral, but some of the behavioral sciences talk about changing habits. And so it's getting a consistent message, what I call the disciples. So if you look inside of exams, the first place we did was change the disciples inside the exams relative to security. And so these turf battles that occur between psychometrics versus content versus security had to be taken away. And that was bringing everybody in that were the measurement experts, including our security and operations folks, and making sure that we all as a team agreed. And then correcting us when we slipped up. So when someone used the word cheater, we're not chasing cheaters. So it's about sort of changing the core structure and then messaging it throughout the organization. The other thing was get the lawyers involved, get them to understand where you're going. Our legal counsel supports us 100% on this, and that's because we brought him in early and suggested to him where we were going with this. So it's about getting key players to every day live the habit. And once they live the habit, they change the culture.
So I think, Phil, here's a question that sort of is right in line with that. And the question is, but if a program defines what a cheater is, then don't they have the right to say, hey, you failed to meet our terms, therefore you are a cheater? Now, wouldn't you just tweak that a bit and say, you're defining what a valid score is, and
yes.
So you failed to meet the terms, therefore you don't have a valid score. You're not calling them a cheater, you're focused on the score. Is that right?
That is correct. I'll give you some examples, Steve. We don't use the word cheater. What we say is you broke our rules in order to ensure a valid score. And so when we file, and we do this frequently, and say that we're holding a score for investigation, we say because you signed these rules and said you understood these rules, we're withholding this. Now, invariably, they will respond, I didn't cheat. And we have a stock response that doesn't even, we don't even engage them in the argument of whether they cheated. We follow back up with, here is what you signed. You broke the rules. You've admitted you broke the rules. Therefore, this is what we're going to continue. So we never go into the battlefield. We put a wall up between the battlefield where they want to drag us to, and lawyers do this as well, but we never engage in the cheater argument. We just refuse. You broke the rules. Here is the consequence for breaking the rules.
Thank you. So here's a question, and I think, so the question is, if we can detect invalid results for, say, high score and a very little elapsed time, really superhuman response times, what's the next step? Invalidate the first exam, then the retest, because what if they change what if they change how they are performing on the test so that you're not flagging it the next time? And I guess what the question is, how do you communicate the invalidation in a way that does not tip a candidate off?
So again, the way that, I assume you're asking me, not Dennis, Steve, is that correct?
Please. If you have a reaction, Phil, and then I'll see if Dennis has a reaction.
I do. I think that what we do is we don't reveal, and you're not hearing me reveal it here, we don't reveal our security protocols. What we do is say that you were seen touching your phone, how we found it, or or whatever is not relevant. You were seen touching your phone. Therefore, we don't provide our statistics. You broke a rule. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but the point is we don't explain to them what they did wrong. We say, here are the things. We don't even say necessarily phone. You touched your electronic device. We said you couldn't do that. You left the, these aren't true, but you left the building for more than 10 minutes. Anything like that, we just say you violated the brake policy. You did this, you did that. And so the idea would be they can change their behavior all they want and try something new next time, but it should show up in the stability of our validity measurement, which, again, we don't reveal how we get to that.
Very good.
So, yeah,
Dennis, do you have a reaction?
Sure. Let me just weigh in. Remember, the whole point here is to get valid test scores. And Frary, Caveon, they said, well, what's the harm in asking someone to retest? So you ask them to retest, but obviously don't give them, if you think that perhaps they've used content that was disclosed, don't share that with them. Give them content that you're pretty sure will actually measure their performance. And if they can show that they have the competence you desire and require, then that's great. If not, then have your policy in place to say, well, now we gave you the retest. You know, you didn't really show that you have the competence, and then you have policy in place to determine what is the next step. And treat everyone fairly.
Very good. So I think we addressed this, but there was a question about how the validity triangle, the new paradigm that Phil outlined, how does it relate to individual score validity? And I believe, Phil, the answer is if you don't trust the score, you don't use that score. It's just an invalidation. Is that correct?
That is what we do. I mean, there's a couple ways, but the idea, if you don't trust the score, you don't release it, you investigate it. That's our principle. If, in fact, so our score, we never have to pull back a score because we never release it. No one ever sees that score until we complete the investigation.
Okay. So there's one last question. Phil, you talked about the challenge we're facing, academic rigor around this critical leg of validity, test security. And so the question is, what type of courses would you include in your suggested professional program? Now, before I ask you to address that, Phil, I do want to say that there has been the creation of the Institute for Exam Security. Yes. It's a nonprofit, and that organization is building test security training and a certification. And so the asker of that question, you can find some details about that on the Caveon website. But Phil, if there's a professional development program around test security, what are some of your opinions of what must be included in that?
Well, I think as a minimum, if you take a look, and I'm going to pull this back, but as a minimum, if you take a look at our educators across the United States and you go into their education program, they get about 1.5 quarters of measurement theory, which I also would claim is insufficient. But clearly, in order for a security individual to be part of the security triangle, they have to have a fundamental knowledge of test and measurement. And because if not, their fundamental knowledge is going to be based in the security around internet, or LANs, or electronics, or all of that, which is important, Steve. But what is not important, or what is more important, is to take that knowledge and embed it into measurement. And why would we be worried about this in measurement? And I think that that's very important. Doesn't exist. And I appreciate that there are movements. I didn't want to imply there aren't movements toward this. What I think is it has to be, it needs to be more of the forefront. So I certainly support the Institute. I support more of that activity. And I also support in the accreditation of that and getting it into the institution of higher learning and raise this as a profession. That's probably more what I was trying to say.
Well, and it's such an important and valid comment to make, Phil, because I have one client who said, hey, I'm going to bring on a director of test security. Where do I find that person? And so, you know, if security is as important as psychometrics and content, which to your model it absolutely is, we've got to have that development. We've got to have that almost supply of test security professionals. Now, we're bumping up on the hour. We always want to keep these under an hour. Phil, do you have a last comment?
Isaac said at one point in his career said that standard setting is where the science of psychometrics and the art of policy meet. And I view it this way. I always tell our policymakers that they have to make a policy based on the plethora, the evidence that I provide them. And that is the same that ought to be coming into security. So I agree it's not one statistic, but if I have 3 statistics and I provide you on that same individual a plethora of evidence, then it is appropriate, and I think we can use the same psychometric argument. We defend standard setting all the time underneath that, and I believe the psychometric triangle will let us defend security decisions on that same issue.
Thank you very much, Phil. Really, really strong comments. And as you indicated, this is something you feel very, very strongly about. So in my mind, this has been a fantastic session. I hope, audience, you agree. We thank you for taking time out of your very busy day. If you have some reactions, if you have some additional questions, please feel free to reach out to Phil and Dennis. Also, we'll be sending you the materials, and on our LinkedIn, we'd love to have some a thread of discussion around this. I think that we're seeing this validity paradigm emerge in different parts of our industry, and we're certainly interested in hearing how it affects your program. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much to Phil Dickinson, Dennis Maines, Caveon Chief Scientist, and Data Forensic Rockstar. We'll see you in January. Have a wonderful holiday, folks. Take care.